In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the aspects and considerations of learning a foreign language by working with a private tutor. And this video follows directly upon the preceding one of learning a foreign language from a teacher in a classroom setting, because these are the two basic variants or prongs or bifurcations of the overall paradigm of learning a foreign language by means of learning directly from another person rather than learning from materials that you study on your own, autodidactically, independently. So I was concluding the other video by enumerating some of the actual benefits that can accrue from if you are able to manage to have a positive experience of learning languages in a classroom setting. What you can learn is the discipline, the regular study habits that are necessary in order to succeed. Whereas without having that experience of seeing it work and bear fruit in actual learning a language, if you just set out on studying on your own, you might not be able to find that internal reserve to know what that kind of discipline is like. I made those observations on the heels of talking about the fact that this classroom teaching model, it tends to be more successful to the degree to which it is more focused and more intense. Obviously, one way of making the overall experience of learning more intense is to work one-on-one with a tutor rather than just sitting in a group with a teacher. You'll obviously and clearly get much more interaction with the tutor than you will with a teacher, which brings some other considerations into play. And in point of fact, one main thing, before I lose sight of it, is that you would lose the opportunity to have any kind of group cohesion, to do group work, or to feel like you're part of a group in a learning environment. And that is very much a personal question. For some people that's extremely important, and for others it's negative. For others it's moot. So that's one thing to think of in wondering about the advisability or suitability of working with a tutor. In general, I would say the consensus is that working with a tutor is more likely to bring fruit, more likely to lead you to success than just taking a class with a teacher. But it's certainly not any kind of guarantee. It's not universal that you will succeed, and the reason for that, I think, is something, again, I could have mentioned this last time as well. At this time, I think it becomes more pertinent. To me, one of the I wouldn't want to say dangers, but problems with either of these models of instruction, the reason why I come to prefer autodidactic study, and again, I don't feel that I'm alone in that. I think that just about all polyglots, all people who've learned many languages, come to that realization. After you have studied a few languages working with other people, you realize that it's better to work on your own. And there's one major reason for that. After you learn the discipline, after you learn the study habits, you learn to kind of take control, take charge of the whole process. And once you've learned how to do that, it just works so much more smoothly, more efficiently, more swiftly. And to be in control, to be in charge of the process is a very, very hard thing to do when you're really working with some other person, when you have surrendered the control to a teacher or a tutor whom you are paying basically to take charge of the process. It's counterintuitive. When you go to sit down in a classroom and somebody else is leading the whole endeavor, there's a natural kind of passivity that you're going to have, and more so, that might be even more pronounced when you are working with a teacher. If you pay somebody extra to give you individual private instruction, you're going to somehow expect that person to take his or her knowledge of the language out of his head and just impart it to you, and that can't work that way. That's why even tutoring doesn't always bring the fruits that are desired. So how can we try to be more sure that it does? Again, by making sure that you're not going in passive. passive by going in active, and I think the best way to do that actually is not really to use a tutor from the very beginning, not to go in as a blank slate, but to go in with some knowledge so that you have some questions to ask and some ability to, again, to keep control of the entire process. If you are going to want to have somebody explain a language to you from the very beginning, how to get it to work, let's think about what kind of tutor you might want. In the whole world of language instruction, there is, to me, an overwhelming bias in favor of native speakers under all circumstances. And to me, that's misguided. Certainly, by the time you're more advanced, certainly by the time you're intermediate and you're wanting to really iron out your pronunciation and your idiomatic usage and learn how to write with native fluidity, all these things can only be done by an educated native speaker. Of course you want one then. But how about when you are just getting started, when you have you need the nuts and bolts of a language explained to you? Every language, every natural language, has elements in it that are going to be confusing and strange and odd to non-native speakers that appear perfectly natural and normal and to a native speaker. And it's actually a hard thing to explain those if you can't sense them or feel them. And so in a certain sense, being a native speaker is kind of a disadvantage to explaining the very basic sort of stumbling blocks in a language, whereas somebody who is from your own background, or at least another foreigner who has learned a language relatively well, will know exactly what your difficulties are and how you can conceptually overcome those. So that might be something to consider if you were to still want somebody to teach you from the very beginning, and that might be necessary if you're learning a language that doesn't have many other materials. But I think just logistically, another aspect of studying with a tutor is that simple fact. How are you going to find one person, so many people learning languages, and how much are you going to pay for that? It's obviously going to be very expensive if you pay somebody to meet you with any kind of regularity. So there too, in some instances of hearing about people studying with tutors and not being happy with the results, it's only natural if they are not going to meet them frequently enough either, and when they do meet them, they're going to expect the person to take charge of the whole process. So I think a preferable way to do language tutoring is, again, to wait till you're kind of at the intermediate level, you've given yourself a foundation, and then to really combine it with the intensity is to go do it in the country itself. And you go into some sort of program where you can live with a family for a couple of weeks and meet a tutor one-on-one, and meet them ideally, I think, for about 4 hours a day is the ideal intensive time. When I've done it for 6 or 8 in Russia or South America, it's kind of feels like wasteful overkill. If you're utterly surrounded by the language and you have that intensive contact for about 4 hours, that's the time to focus and then just absorb for the rest of the time. So yes, learning with a tutor is something I think that every language learner has to do at a certain point, ideally after you're somewhat more advanced, because that's the only way to really wake up a language, make it come alive. There's only so much you can do with books and tapes and the like, but if you can give yourself a foundation in that, like I said, going to a country, getting a private tutor there, or maybe when you're lucky or even more advanced, truly know how to take control of the process, you don't necessarily need to hire somebody to teach you. If you can take total control of the process, you can just go to the country and sort of turn everybody you meet into your tutor when you're truly in control of the entire process. But all things said and considered, yes, learning with a tutor is a very good way of getting yourself a good solid foundation in a language, presuming again that you're able to keep control of the entire process.